Hello and welcome back to episode 4 of Split Decision. We take a little look through the week. We're even going to maybe do some predictions. And then we're going to bring up our split decision statements where we basically go head to head on a couple of points. But of course, the person who didn't make the point gets to choose which side of the argument we're on. Now, Mitch, to take a look at this week, I feel like we're going to almost race through this a little bit because a lot of the matches were, how do I put it, pointless.
Yeah. And those that were ultimately gave the outcome we expected. I think this week was like, there's nothing to write home about. Everything played out, I think, roughly as we wanted it to.
Yeah.
And where it didn't matter. So yeah, it was a pretty meh week.
Yeah, I'll take a quick look. Like I'll just basically bring things up on the other monitor, of course, and just have a little look at some of the games. I think Ascend versus FPX, at least in my mind, I kind of expected if this was like a playoffs game, FPX to win. But I think both teams kind of went into that one even admitting that they were, oh, we're gonna save some strats. We're gonna like basically not play to the very best of our abilities.
hmm
Monster looked pretty cracked. I would say Angel's Yoru was cool. Is there anything else you kind of took out of that game? I think Breeze was probably the most enjoyable map of the three.
Yeah, I think for the most part, this game just it kind of falls flat, if not just confirming things that we already kind of knew. Like,
Mm.
for example, the likes of Monster, a wonderful addition to this roster. I think probably one of the most
So I guess he's
underrated when he
pretty
was signed
cracked, you
up.
know?
So I guess who didn't have a bad game. The others, it is what it is. I didn't mind the Yoru at all from Angel. I thought it was
Oh, it was
really fun
fun.
watching him play that. Like he had a lot of really cool ideas for being sneaky and getting behind and really putting a send on the back foot. So that was cool. But other than that, I guess it was. This was probably the most interesting game, being the seeding game that it
Yeah.
was. And yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if we go like Met Guild is another match that we sort of had going on.
Mhm.
I think all I really have to say about that one is, other than that, the entire team again was very disappointing. Shados was okay in the
Mhm.
first map. I've not been impressed with much we've seen from them this season. Even the like NAVI series that they won. Like I think there was one other convincing victory they had. Let's put it this way: of all the teams going into the playoffs, I think they've been by far the most disappointing and need a
Mhm.
massive turnaround.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. We know, we have those excuses as to why this may have happened along the way, but ultimately, you don't know what mech is going to turn up any given day right now. Nats is going to turn up, that's for
Yeah.
sure. You're going to have your Defo, your Chronicle, your Reg, or someone else there, but the reality is, right now, this team isn't one I'd bet on moving forward into playoffs unless something big changes.
Yeah. Then another game that I see. I think this for me gives more confirmation that Navi actually do have something. Like of all the teams that I think that went out, they're the one I least want to change anything. Maybe not has something in the sense of like they're gonna win a Masters, but I mean like
Right.
the team was good and
hmm
close to being in playoffs. And I think of all the teams that were like of the sort of the rest, they're the one I most enjoyed. Even though they were really fucking slow,
hmm
I still enjoyed watching them. I think Cloud is sensational. I think, as we sort of argued last week, Duno is an excellent player. So
hmm
I think that they have the right pieces there. Dinks has had a bit of a poor season in comparison to I think last one. And then Guild, I feel like Guild were fucking around. If I'm being honest, like pick Leo playing Reyna was the sort of one where I was just like, you guys don't give a shit, do you?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to see Navi perform decently. Like, obviously, Guild coming in, this game doesn't mean that much to them, yada yada. So we can't really
Yeah,
draw
they
conclusions
were
about it.
through him
But
first.
exactly, they were locked in no matter what. But the reality is, from the perspective of Navi, these guys have been on a steady grind, and it doesn't really seem to slow down. They keep hitting success after success, reaching new heights, and I think that's all you can really do as a team trying to break through
Yeah,
right now, one foot in front of the other. Keep trying to establish yourself, and right now they're making a name for themselves on a tier 2 level. It's just that, yeah, you put Navi up against Guild, up against Fnatic in like elimination games,
yeah.
Ascend, FPX, Liquid.
Like,
I think you're going to get a pretty pretty
they won though.
in elimination games again, just to really underline that in a game that carries some weight, you put them up against each other. I think it's a different story, but
Yeah.
Navi can swing upwards. They can, hit that level. Just right now, they're not going to hit it every single game. At least I don't think so.
Yeah.
in some time.
Focus versus Oglu. Honestly, there's only one thing I want to highlight about this game, and that is this.
Yeah,
This was.
yeah,
Well, actually, wait. More
yeah.
specifically,
Mm-hmm. There you go.
this.
41 and 18.
I was
Absolutely
like,
crazy.
I even said it at the beginning of the series. I was like, I think Yugi's had good games. I don't think he had star games. This was his star game. Now,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it was against an OG London United, who I think they're the only team where I compare. Okay, actually, G2 as well. G2 has to be in that bracket because they definitely got worse. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Or other teams got better.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a positive person, personally, I'm not. I think they got worse. So I think OG London United are the only team that got worse. Like, they had their moments here and there, but ultimately I was not impressed with them throughout the entirety of the season. Technically, they did get... No, actually, no, they did do actually worse. If they'd won this game, technically they would have also been 2 and 3 like last season. But last season, I genuinely saw something within the roster where I was like, okay, they're beating the teams they're better than, and they're going close versus teams that they're worse than. Now they've kind of lost to teams that they should be better than, and I've not seen enough of an improvement for me to go, and if they come in next season, they'll get even better. I don't know if I believe that anymore.
Sure, it was just flat out. I think in some of the games they lost, and that's really where we draw that conclusion from. For
Mm.
Focus, another team that sort of has that Navi vibe about them. They're coming
Yeah,
up, they're making a name
but
for
they're like
themselves.
they're
But
OG of last season. If they get better,
sure, yeah, yeah,
cool.
yeah.
If they don't,
Mhm.
then I don't care.
I think BBL are in the same spot as well though, where like they
Yeah,
are again getting
definitely.
better and better. They're a team that's punching up and that looks possibly like the best Turkish team that we've seen on an EMEA stage. I think in terms of like the consistency out of them and what they're putting out, like I know what I'm getting when I look at a BBL game, and there
Yeah.
could be a couple of ups and downs there that they need to iron out, but I think that those are definitely things they can fix going forward. So I'm excited for the future of this team and hopefully see Turkey push up into that top three in a bracket or whatever the format looks like next year.
Yeah, the only other game, of course, was Fnatic versus G2, which I think was closer than we expected, considering that G2 hasn't been great. I will say that G2 always seem to match up well against Fnatic, no matter what sort of form they're
Mm-hmm.
in. And yeah, it was close. Like, it was a decent game from them. If that had happened at the beginning of the season, I probably would have had quite a bit of hope. Or maybe I would have underestimated Fnatic. The one of the two, I'm not really sure. But yeah, Mixwell being on Chamber makes a lot of sense. Again, it was kind of what we expected. And they basically just went back to what they started the season with, and without all the weird changes. Now, before we move on to talking about playoffs, which is obviously the most direct thing, I
Mm-hmm.
want to talk. So I want to bring up the circuit points, which yeah,
Okay.
you can see on your screen, because I think this is actually really interesting. Now, obviously, the chances are G2 is going to drop down from here because someone has to be going to this Masters, and even finishing last, you get 150 points, which will put a fair few teams above G2. So chances are they're going to be
Sure.
down here somewhere, but everybody else has been locked in. Now, one good thing, like if you're an OG fan, they even with that loss, they still made it because Big didn't win. If Big had won, they would have actually. Well, I think we were told this. I think if Big had won, it would have fucked the entire system. Oh, no, actually wouldn't, because they would have qualified. But if they hadn't qualified, it would have fucked the system, because I don't think there's actually a rule in place right now for what happens if there's a tie break, because it didn't
Good.
expect it to happen. But
Yeah.
yeah,
All
obviously
right.
Focus
Cool.
Focus didn't make it, which they were kind of screwed because they didn't play last season.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
it does
Yeah.
mean that, like, for teams that are already out, so you've got the likes of G2, you've obviously got BBL, you've got Navi, and you've got OG, they are still in this year. Now, is there any teams there, Mitch, that I guess maybe excluding G2, because we kind of talked about that already. Of the other three teams, do you think there's someone that should change something? Because, like, ultimately, for them to make LCQ, like, obviously, for anybody who doesn't know, one team makes out of LCQ. So for any of these three teams to win it, I'd say it's fucking unlikely right now. But, like, is there anything you think any of these teams can do to, like, actually get that spot?
I don't think so. I don't think they should with a small pivot time unless there's already like a critical
Hmm.
crack
Well,
that's formed
it's
in a
3 months. No,
roster.
is it 3 months? No, it'd be 2 months, right?
But this is the thing, right?
Thereabouts.
You can't scrap a lot of your roster, right? If you've made roster changes since you started to earn
Hmm.
these points, then you're not going to be able to segue
Well, you
more
could
than one
change
extra player, right?
two.
It You can change two total, but that would be from when you first started earning points, right? If you make a second, if you make a
Okay.
change and later on pivot again, then that would affect like the first couple points you earned with that roster and so on. So I
Yeah,
think
because
it's like
Navi
core
have made
whatever
a
your core
change.
three have earned.
But yeah, Navi have made a change since last season. OG has made a
Ugly.
change since
Yeah.
last season. BBL have not.
I guess the question is, do any of these teams have a like? It's not even do they have a player they need to change. It's do they have somebody right now that they can hit up that they can say, "Yo, we need you. You know, you're gonna turn up to prac next week. We're gonna trial you." They're gonna
Yeah.
trial, and they are pretty confident that by the end of the week they're gonna have him on the team, and then start working to towards
Do you know?
beating some teams potentially like Fnatic, Liquid, FPX. One of those teams. One of those teams is in
I
there, and that's
probably
gonna be like,
should have saved this
oof,
for later,
okay,
but should G2 just pick up Twiston?
in place of.
Mixwell? Because
Mm.
okay, Mixwell has been better, but he's not better than Twiston.
Let's
I
let's
don't
let's
care if
say
you're mental,
let's
but
save
like,
this let's save this for later because I have a question that this will work
okay,
for. So go.
I'll leave it for now. Right, okay, let's quickly before we get, because we're gonna get into that in say a few minutes. I want to talk about overall playoffs thoughts, because like. I think this is maybe the first time ever, and I said this to you before we started recording. It's like, there's no team that I think people could predict going through. Like maybe if you don't say Fnatic, I think you're a bit mental, or if you don't say FPX. But I think that third team, you could say any of the remaining teams, and there's a valid argument as to why you think they're going through.
Yep, 100%. The realistically, I look at this bracket and I'm immediately saying, okay, Mech, I don't know. Guild being in a pretty reliable spot, but they weren't necessarily like, I don't know, mix them in the other group.
Hmm.
Do things go the same way? I don't
And
think
they
so.
lost to Navi, and I get that like they were fucking around,
Yeah, it's the
but
same as the
I feel
Fnatic
like you
game.
should beat. But that's the thing, Fnatic won. I feel like you should beat Navi anyway. Like I think that Fnatic pissing around versus Navi would have still beaten them. I think FPX pissing around versus Navi would have still beaten them. I even think Ascend pissing around versus Navi would have beaten them. So it's like
Right.
I do think Navi are good. I just don't think they should be on the level of Guild if they're going to qualify. And that's the one thing that has me a
Okay.
little bit worried about them.
Okay, I can definitely see that perspective, and I think that's sort of like I have a little bit more faith in them. I want to give them a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
more
that's
wiggle
fair.
room there, just because looking at the pieces, they seem like they could be very good, and this is going to be a different kind of schedule, different kind of test for them. But
Yeah.
that's it. So it's like a little bit worried, but I think Guild have earned their spot, pushing through. Still a challenge. Fnatic, I think, will breeze through. I think they take top spot easy. Maybe not easy this time around, but definitely grand finals. I would be surprised
Yeah,
they
I
don't push
think
all the way.
I have a lot more faith that FPX could beat them the second time.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
just
Definitely.
because I literally, Doombro said himself, is like, we work best against teams we can watch. The first time we played Fnatic, they'd never played.
Yeah.
So it's literally like they were the first team to come up against Alpha, and he literally said that the second, I think it was Alpha got 4 kills in the pistol round, he was just like, shit. Like I thought this kid would be good, but I
Yeah.
didn't think he'd be like this much of a game changer for the roster. So it's kind of like, now they have the tape, now they have the info, they can start countering someone like Durka as well. And I think
Hmm.
they're very good at that. And I also think Guild are very good at that. So realistically, that they can hard prep into both Ascend and Mech. The only thing I will say is prepping Mech right now is a waste of time, because if they're going to qualify, it's not this team. You're going to see someone else appear, and you're going to be
Hmm.
like, where the fuck were these guys a week ago when they lost to Big?
Except
Where was that?
Nats.
Where were they then? But like,
Nats will look the same. He'll just be the same dude he has been the whole
yeah.
time, and he'll still be MVP because of it. He's been. The
Yeah.
thing is, you have to realize in the games that you're losing like that, where your team is struggling, and in the role that Nats plays, to still have the success rate that he does it's baffling looking at this dude and,
Yeah.
and how he's able to find so much space even when everything else
So
is
I
going
think
wrong.
I've done my pick'em. I want to see if there's anything
Mhm.
in this pick'em that you disagree with, and I feel like it will revolve around this one.
No, well, see, this is the thing. Do I think that Guild will beat Ascend? I think they can, but I also think
Yeah.
Ascend can beat them. That's a close match, and I hope a good one. I can definitely see reasons that you're giving Ascend the upper hand. So, like, sure,
The
right?
funny thing is
That's
as well,
possible.
I still think this game is 50-50 too.
Yeah, the preparation advantage though in guilds play, it
Mm.
just gives me too much. Your top seed already. The teams you've been playing have been giving a weird game. That last game they played was fucking
But do we
wild,
have
and I
to...
want to almost
One
think that
sec.
was them just going, "Hey guys, let's not even fuck around. Let's
So
just
the only
go
thing I will say
hog
though, the
wild."
difference between this game and this game is a day.
Yes, and the same, but the same the other way around, right? And what I'm saying is, guild now get to prepare for both Ascend and Mech. They get to look at this
Yeah. For this game, but for
comfortably.
the Liquid
Yeah,
game, they only get a day
if they lose,
if they
yeah, if
lose.
they win, they go 24th, and then it's easy anyways. And I think
Yes,
guild benefit so much from that, from having those day breaks. If they go
I
lower
agree.
bracket, I don't actually think they make it through third, but I think they make it through because they get to that upper final. I think
Yes.
that's where if they just have to win one game, and sure, it's going to be against Ascend or Mech, so it's super close. But then you tell me they get to spend the next couple days prepping for both teams, while each of those teams are not prepping for guild. Neither of them are going, yeah, let's get ready for the guild game, guys. Because what if you lose the first game? Now you're fucked.
Yeah,
And you'll be
exactly.
thinking, why didn't we prep the other half of the time
But
on the
the
team we
problem
were
is
going to
as well,
play? So yeah,
the
it's
thing
too much of
that's
a leg up.
this game especially, because I feel like FPX for me are favorites. I think that for me is a clear favorite. I think Fnatic is a slight favorite in a lot of these games. Ascend are favorites in this game, but both teams play off this almost like bullshit of, if we're playing well, we're playing well, and we'll like work off each other and we'll get multi kills. And I think that Ascend are better at it right now, but I don't like the idea of going into Mech with that mentality. Like, I think the teams that beat Mech, like with the Guild versus Mech game, if you watch that back, Guild had a master plan to dismantle them.
Mm-hmm.
Are Ascend going to go in with a master plan? No. No, I don't think they will. Like, they'll have some cool ideas, they'll have some cool strats, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they just go in and go, oh, look, we're playing Mech today, I'm just going to headbutt my monitor and just... Like, of course, they've thought everything through that they're going to do, but not in the same way like a Fnatic or an FPX or a Guild would do. And I think that's a bad thing, because if you go, I'm going to just out-aim Chronicle, and Chronicle's like, do you know what, today I'm on shit on anyone who faces me mode, that's a scary game for me, even though I do still like kind of heavily favor Ascend just based on what we've seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I have to like I'll give Ascend the upper hand in that first match. It's the guild game. It's gonna be tight. It's gonna be close. I think
Yeah.
Ascend can make a lower bracket run for sure. I'm not so sure about guild pivoting that quickly. There's a lot of games back to back if you lose out on that,
Well,
and
you also have
it's
to
no
beat
time to warm
FPX
up
or
as well.
Fnatic. Like, that's a guarantee. That's the
Exactly.
problem with this lower bracket, is either FPX or Fnatic, or, well, or both, if Liquid
Mm-hmm.
pull out, or both are going to be in that lower bracket, and only one of them can get through. So that's why, and that's the other thing as well. I think if Guild lose this game, I think there's actually a pretty high chance they lose this game too.
With you, yeah, yeah. Or
And
the one after. That's
the other thing as well, is there is a small part of me that thinks if Fnatic lose, they don't carry on in the lower bracket. And the only reason I'm saying that is because as of right now, Fnatic have not been defeated. And it's very good to be invincible or look invincible when you haven't lost. I feel like that's a
mm,
huge thing with teams. Like, you have that honeymoon period, then you lose, you've got to be like, okay, how do we fix things? Whereas for now, it's like, we're the innovative team, like, Alpha is having crazy games. I do think they have the right players and support system that shouldn't happen, but there's just a
mm-hmm.
small part of me that goes, if they lose to FPX, it could get scary, because it's happened before.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can see a team lose a game and fall off, but I think that's a very particular kind of team. When I look at Fnatic right now, already prior to the additions, I'm like, this is a team that's going to struggle to ever have that sort of deflated period, because I can't
Yeah.
imagine being, let alone on a team with them, I can't imagine being in a room with Boaster and not having like any negative energy just fixed immediately. So
Yeah.
when I imagine a team with him and now Enzo there as well, who have got a lot of firsthand experience, the motherfucker doesn't frown. Like it's
Yeah, they don't
incredible
have
to then
many,
think
like,
of.
people who are like a proper downer in the team. Like, I
No.
don't think there's anyone who's like, oh, it's fucked. Oh,
I
there's
know,
no
GG,
point. Do you
guys.
know what? It's funny because I'm wearing a T-shirt of the guy who's literally that in
Oh,
fucking
yeah,
Hitchhiker's Guide. To... What's the point? Like, I
Mhm.
don't think there's anyone in that team like that. Obviously, we don't really know much about Alpha yet. Durka just seems to get mad fired up whenever anything
Mhm.
goes wrong. He's like, "We just lost a fucking. I'm gonna go kill all of them." Like that. That's his response.
Yeah.
Is more of like it maybe frustration, but not like being down on himself. And I think
Mhm.
Mystic, especially with the right people around him, will always be very positive. So I see that point. I'm just scared if they lose now because it's like they don't have much time to fix things, and that's where it gets scary. And also, none of the games in the lower bracket, none of the games in this whole thing are easy. Like right
Yeah.
now, we are potentially setting things up that Mech is the easiest game. Do you realize how fucking mental that is?
Mhm.
They're literally called Masters 3 champions. They're the finalists of champions. That's another thing. Our first game that we're casting is the rematch of champs.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
mental. And
Very
then
different
this
game than
this
it
game
was.
is like like a game that goes back as old as fucking time. Oh, it's a mental first day.
It's gonna be a good day, man. It's gonna be a good day, and that's the thing. Like you're saying, there's most of these games, vast majority. It seems like it can go any
Yeah.
way. It seems like
Max is like
you,
60-40, and I mean max.
yeah, you're gonna have a pretty tough time choosing a side. It could be a pretty hard decision to make, couldn't it, Tom?
Why? Okay, let's fuck it. Let's move on then. Let's move on to what the show is called. You see it? Oh no, I pointed the wrong way twice. That way, there
There
it
we
is. It says split
go.
decision in within the Valorants. But yeah, obviously for anybody who doesn't know, I think this is episode 4 at this point. But
Mhm.
basically, we are both going to make a couple of statements each. The other person then gets to decide whether they argue for or against the statement, and then, well, maybe at a point you might have to argue against the own statement that you said. The point is to almost try and make your opponent choose the opposite or just have a fantastic counter argument. Mitch, first or second?
Uh oh, hold on. The dog's going wild. I think someone just got home. Um, so I'll take this one first because I already kind of gave it away earlier. I cut
Okay.
you off so that I could still make the point. Um, so my first one's in relation to G2. And this roster's been a little bit bumpy recently, Tom. There's been some ups and downs.
Okay.
There's been some swaps here. There's been some role swaps as well. Some things going all over the place. And you said yourself, I mean, you think Mixwell's getting dropped. So I'll ask you the question. Um, is Mixwell going to be at LCQ?
Did you know what's funny? One of my one is also I've got a couple, so it's fine.
Okay.
Maybe I'll keep it in anyway, just because it's interesting. Is Mixo going to be at LCQ? I think he is. I think he is. And a lot of the reason behind that is, firstly, we've heard G2 sort of say that they're not going to make any roster moves. I also think it would be kind of weird to make the roster moves when they've already basically earned enough points to get into LCQ. Like, I think that they are definitely in a rough patch, but at the same time, we're going to have massive amounts of shuffles after LCQ. A lot of the players who are currently available, other than, as said, like I mentioned Twiston earlier, other than maybe him, I don't think there's many players that I would necessarily say are better than Mixwell. Like, maybe on a par, but you're also taking a gamble because he is someone that, if they do qualify to champions, has a lot of LAN experience, is someone who has a huge brand as well, which obviously you don't
Hmm.
always want to take that into consideration. But if that's so much pressure on a young player, like say for example you threw Twiston in there, he's not going to have a big community basically saying, well, if you're not better than Mixwell, we're going to shit on you. And that's just the case.
Hmm.
That's how it goes. We saw it with Kellogg's. Like, every time he had a bad game, he was thrown completely under the bus, as if it was completely his fault, which is never the case. It's a team game, especially in Valorant more than any other. So I think it would just be a bad time to make a roster move, even though I wouldn't be surprised if it happened.
Hmm. Well, obviously, I've got to go the other way, which is, I think, a
Yes.
decently easy one to throw
Yeah, for sure.
some questions at because, like, coupled with the recent changes in composition, I think Mixwell hasn't hit that superstar performance. I think that's why they turned around and said, "Hey, we need to try change it up. We need to see if Hoodie can get it done. Maybe you can be more valuable in the backlines." And he wasn't. And then they're like, "Okay, go back to what works." And he's starting to show some legwork there. But for G2, my main thing right now, as an organization looking at this team, I mean, it's one of the most ruthless organizations to play for. These guys accept nothing less than
Yeah.
first place. Never mind second. Grand finals means nothing to them unless they get that trophy. And I think they look at this as a disgrace of a performance for the roster. And we've seen this team before be extremely ruthless with cutting players at the slightest sign of an issue, whether it be
Yeah.
behind the scenes or whether it be within the game. So I really don't. I wouldn't be surprised if G2 were looking at this saying we want to make a roster change. I don't know what that would look like. I don't know if they would be like, "Hey Kellogg's, hey, how you like it not being in playoffs in
Again.
Spain and BRL? You wanna come back out, make
Oh.
a big debut?" And the thing is, they can make one roster
Reunion?
change. If they bring Kellogg's back on, they could make two roster changes, I think technically. But they could
Oh, I
still
don't even want to
they
look at
could
the
still
maths
make
of
one.
that.
I know that they could still make one more. I'm pretty sure, which
Mm.
wouldn't be bringing him back. So I think the door is open for them, and it's going to come down to a bunch of things. What Mixwell wants, what the roles of the teams are looking like. I don't know if Hoodie being put on a duelist is then almost a sign of some internal struggles in the team that maybe he's saying like I've got that itch. I want to go back to my day one, my jet, and really be the difference maker of this team. And when all else is failing, maybe he's gonna pipe up and say, "Hey, maybe I should take the reins for this game." And I just think there's a lot of things that are red flags right now for those changes to potentially come through. I do agree. I'd probably rather them play it safer and try to fix what they've got right now, polish it up
Mm.
for LCQ. But who knows, man? I think the
I'm
pressure from the
tempted.
org makes a huge difference.
I'm tempted to piggyback off your one and just add mine in as a quick one and then use my other ones just because
Go for it.
mine's
Yeah.
mine was a lot harsher than yours, but along the similar lines. And mine is G2 should drop the entire roster, as the rumors said, and start from scratch.
No, see, I'll right away say no, purely because why would you do that before seeing the results of LCQ? It makes no sense to me. It's like nobody's raised, but you're folding just because you got a shit hand. Like, bro, see the flop if it's free, It makes no sense
Mm.
to not, yeah, sure, you're gonna pay them what, an extra month or two, but fuck, at this point, I don't think it makes a difference, 3 months extra salary worthwhile to maybe make that extra little bit of a push. I think if anything, G2 should be looking at this roster and saying, I want to invest more now because this is like the
Yeah.
roster's losing its fucking
The thing.
heartbeat and we need to resuscitate it if we're going to get some
Okay.
value out of it.
This is the thing though, and this is
Fuck, they
the
already
only
sold Kellogg's. All they need is one game where
the
Mixwell goes
only
crazy and they'll
reason,
be
right?
like, money, baby. Or
The
hoodie.
only reason I actually had to argue for this point is that all the arguments against it are incredibly short term. Like, let's be real. When we're talking about slots, like going into the Riot League, G2 are number one on the list. They're one of the biggest organizations. They have been in Valorant since the very beginning. In fact, I think they may have even had the first team, like as an actual org, or at least one of them. They were right there at the very start.
Yeah,
I think definitely within EMEA, like you had teams like FPX and stuff come up, but G2 was super early.
Mm-hmm.
For them, they're almost guaranteed, especially with the fact that they have an LEC team. So their goal is already going to be looking forward into that. Right now, other than maybe Nuke and Hoodie, I don't think anybody within that team is good enough to be what G2 want them to be. I don't think they're a championship winning team. I don't
agree.
think that the core that they have is enough. And I also don't think. I think right now, G2 have the sort of like nuclear Nico problem. If you watch a lot of CSGO, where he used to try an IGL and be the best player in the team, and basically like write the theme tune, sing the theme tune. That's a quote that only like 2 people are going to get out there. But he basically is trying to do everything, and that doesn't make sense as a roster. I genuinely
Mm-hmm.
think they would be better off starting out with an in-game leader, building around them, and creating a brand new team. And if they're looking long-term, ultimately not being a champions this year doesn't matter. And if I'm being brutally honest, unless there is a fucking miracle and they completely turn things around, do you genuinely believe they're going to be the one team to make it out of LCQ?
No, no, no. Of course not. But here's the thing. What is the best option right now? Like, what do they
Mm,
lose by waiting till LCQ? There's no team right now that they could pick up that, first of all, there's no team right now that they could pick up realistically that's
could
better than
build
them that
around
they
Mech.
could buy. Mech, I would say, are in a very difficult situation right now between
But
whether
if
or not
anyone
they're
could fix it,
if
it would
anyone
be
could fix it, it
G2.
would be the likes of G2, sure. And I think that, that's definitely somewhere that Mech are the easy option. Maybe like an Ascend. I don't know what things are looking like in the backlines there. They're one of the newer orgs. I don't see
Yeah.
like Fnatic, FPX, Guild, Liquid, these guys
No.
all want to be involved in franchise. There's
But
no way
let's
that these guys turn around and
okay.
go, yeah, we'll sell our spot for a bit of money. No, they want to be in this
I
game.
genuinely think though, if you're G2, you are a team known for spending bank. You're also one of the most likely. I don't know if Navi's going to be in the league. If they are, then obviously this is void. But I think if you had a team of like Cloud, Duno, Nats, and then pick maybe like Shados Chronicle and try and mix that up, I think that is a far better team than the team you have right now in G2.
Sure, but what's the point? What's the point in doing that right now?
Well,
Sorry
it's going
again.
to take you months to get
If
that
you
done.
can get it done, if you've got almost guarantees from the players, but there are 2 to 3 scenarios where I think G2 pull the trigger on that and say now's the time.
Yeah.
Anywhere else, it just seems like you have still got the opportunity to build that team if you've got this big bankroll. Maybe it costs a tiny bit extra after LCQ,
Yeah.
but maybe another team doesn't make it to LCQ. That org goes, fuck it. We're having money troubles. We're in 35 different games. We're cutting Valorant. It's not going to happen. But like maybe a team quits. Maybe some players go, fuck you, teammates. You know, y'all made fun of my chocolate pudding yesterday. I'm out. Fuck you. And they leave. And then the
What?
G2 are able to pick up these players. I was drawing on some personal experience there, right?
Oh, okay.
We don't need to talk about it. I think that for G2, if those things line up, sure. But right now, it makes more
Hmm.
sense for them to wait, see if they make it through LCQ on a miracle run, see if somebody pops off to the extent that maybe they can get some value and sell them somewhere else later on. And then most importantly for them, maybe you've got a player or two that that become incredible. Maybe Mixwell is
Yep.
gonna figure out, oh, yo, if I get me and these two guys, and we take these guys from a disbanded team that left because of the chocolate pudding situation, and then we're in a
Still
really good
talking about
spot where
chocolate
we've got
pudding.
like, so you've brought it up as much as me now, Tom. You see what I mean? Like it's
Fuck's
Jesus.
sake.
We got a really good team built there and whatever. I think there's
Mm,
way more positive outcomes just leaving it to LCQ.
okay. Well, we've spoken about G2 enough. I want to get into
Yeah,
my actual first one
let's go.
this was like my bonus. Mech need at least one roster move to compete at the top level again.
Wow, that's a pretty heavy one. I'm gonna say no
Yeah, it's a
right
hard
away.
one.
I don't agree because I can't look at that roster and think of any one player to take off that I don't believe in 3 months will be back playing at a tier 1 level. I think they've
Yep.
been like pretty much coming into this season. I said off the bat, like I'm not gonna judge Mech. Fuck if they go out in last place. I don't care. That's like I give them that excuse. I give them that leeway. And I think we see it in that they have the individual ability still, but they're just not on the same page. They're not as organized. They're not as clean as they used to be. And that's not an issue of the players. As far as I know, there's no issue behind the scenes with the players. Like personally, to me, it's an issue of getting them into a stable environment, giving them some time, and they'll be right back at tier 1.
Okay. Well, the reason I would say yes is just because I'm looking at. I think Defo as a piece of the puzzle is fantastic. I think at times when Chronicle and Shados are at their peak, they're very good. Right now, I think the things they actually need most, I think some of the calling has been a little rough. Like, I've not been particularly impressed with that. And I think, like, maybe a change up even within, like, the IGL would be a big one. But the main thing is I'm looking at Defo as, like, he's the tip of the spear. And I do genuinely think he's a fantastic player. I do think there are more explosive players out there. And that's actually something I think that they really miss. Because say, for example, take Fnatic. Fnatic have the structure, they have the setup, they have the ability to sort of just go off the chains at times. And that's because of someone like Durka. Like, they can have all these brilliant ideas, they don't work, and they go, okay, we're going to go back to basics and we're just going to send in Durka and he's going to win us around. I don't think they have that looseness to them. Enough of it, at least. I don't think they have someone that will just push up mid and just take things into his own hands. Like, you go back to that Ascent game that we casted, where they went for the same sort of slow execution every single round. Defo did fine within that system, but at some of the time, I want to see him go a little bit mad and be like, I'm going to go hunting. And they need someone like that. Now, is that him to be replaced? Not necessarily. Maybe there's someone else down the line that would work. But I'm looking at players like Cloud. I'm looking at players like Purpo. I know you've probably seen some of Purpo's performances if people haven't. The
Mm-hmm.
guy is insane. He's very young. He's within the same region. I think if you throw him into that team, I genuinely think they go straight back to being a fantastic roster again. And maybe that just means that someone like Defo needs the confidence, or someone else in the team still needs that alongside them. But right now, I don't think they're even close. And maybe next week they will be. But that's just mech, unfortunately. I just think that maybe the ship has sailed.
Wow, that's a pretty heavy perspective. Let's talk a little bit about sinking ships though, Tom. So
Oh no.
I've got a little bit of a question for you.
Mm.
I suppose I've got a statement.
All
Team
right.
Liquid, where I'm going with this. Agree or disagree, Tom? Team
Okay.
Liquid are going to crumble in playoffs.
Is Crumble not qualifying? That's because I feel like it's very much how you define the word crumble. I'm actually gonna disagree with this statement.
Okay.
And I will tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they will be crumbling in playoffs because I don't think they're top 3 right now. So if they do qualify, then I think that that's exceeding expectations. And if they don't qualify, I'm not surprised. So I wouldn't put that as crumbling because the reason I would say that is because I look at the teams that are currently there, and I think that, as said, we basically said there's 10% either side of 50 within every single game. Like, even if you get Mech versus Fnatic, one team's been on fire, the other team has been awful, I think it's a 60-40. Because I think that Mech can still have those crazy moments, and I think Fnatic at times can drop off. Now I look at Liquid, they are in that bracket. Sometimes they are the best team that we have, and that's genuinely the truth. On the right day, at the right time, they're incredible. Does that mean I think they crumble when they play bad? No, I think it's just the other side of the pendulum swing that within this roster. They have that sort of like either side of the coin that they wake up on, that's how they play on the day. So personally, no matter what the results are, unless they get banged, like if they lose 31-31 to one of the teams, then fair enough, they crumbled. But I think even if they lose 2-0 to someone, I don't think that's crumbling for Liquid. I just don't know where they stand.
Yeah. By crumbling, I mean they come in, they face the big boys, your FPX. Maybe they make it past that game. I see them falling to FPX. I see them going down lower bracket, and depending who they face there, it could be an ugly affair.
Well, it's going to be Guild or Ascend. Like, either way, it's not good.
It's the thing. And I think that Liquid so far, so they've made this change. They've brought DreamS in, and I've started to say, week on week. That's it. It was just 2 weeks. Week on week, we're like, hey, he's getting better. You know what I mean? Like, he's pushing it. The team's looking better.
2 weeks.
Well, that is true. Week on week. That's it. It doesn't extend. I didn't say week on week, on week. I said just 2. And
so if it had been over like 2 years, week on week on week on week on week on week
on week. But yeah, no, look, they have definitely shaped it better. They've started to mold a little bit. Combination of the schedule crunch, not having a week to prepare for every single game. You've got a roster with
days for the first one.
Yep. And now DreamS is coming in a very heavy supportive role. He is late round. He's involved a lot. This isn't a simple, pop in, point and click, go do your shit. And the teams they played against, they look great. His clutch percentage, I think, is the highest.
These are reasons why they will crumble.
These are reasons they will crumble, right?
Okay.
Because
just checking.
DreamS looked fantastic. His clutch percentage, like I said, highest in all the VCT. Again, he's playing with less rounds. It's only about half the rounds, by the way, compared to the next people down in the clutch percentage. Even though he's only played 2 games, just because that NAVI game went so goddamn long. it was like almost OT. It was a full rounds, and then like 16-14 or something. It was nuts. So he's played a lot of rounds. The teams he's played against, that's where I start to question it. You can do it against a NAVI. You can do it against a mech that are looking off form, that we're given all these reasons we've given so far in this episode alone, let alone on the broadcast and on the desks and so forth. They've not looked great. So for Liquid to come in and dominate them and look good, sure, yeah, I kind of expect that, if anything, if you're a decent team. But I'm very worried when they come up against an FPX, against a team that I consider to be one of the most strategic in the world, one of the best at shutting you the fuck down. Like, if you do not have a deep strat book against these guys and they figure you out, they will apply that pressure every single round, and you better have a response. I don't know if Liquid will have that depth. What I see them rely on right now, I don't think will work against higher caliber teams, and that is all that's left at this point.
You think they're going to get banged, is what you're saying. You think Team Liquid are going to get banged?
I think, well, the statement I've been left to argue is that they'll crumble. Maybe I was trying to get you to argue that. So, I don't know if that's my opinion. That's what I have to argue here. And sure,
so, but your statement here is that that Team Liquid will get banged.
Yes.
Mitchman.
Yes.
2K22. Okay. Just checking.
According to the rules of the game, that is accurate.
All right, sweet. All right. Well, I have got my final statement, and I feel like this one you probably could have seen coming a mile off.
Let's go.
NAVI were the third best team in Group B and should be in playoffs.
Navi were the third best team. The third best team.
Third best team in Group B and should be in playoffs.
See, after that Navi Guild game, I'm inclined to disagree. Just
Inclined to
off the
disagree.
pain that I suffered, the length of that series.
Okay.
But no,
They are
I
not
think.
the third best team.
See, I have to say Guild are first, right? Sure.
Yep.
Liquid up there. Start the season again right now. Maybe Liquid are first. I don't know if they get the runway, they get the time. Mech have been shaky. I don't necessarily agree that they're third. I think they're certainly the weakest coming into playoffs, the weakest look to them. And who else is going to be there? You know, down to Big, BBL, and Navi. I mean, it ain't. I guess it's not big. The question then is, do I think Navi are better than BBL? I guess because of the guild game, man. It's so hard to decide though, because the guild game didn't matter. I don't know to what extent guild were coming into play that day. If I remove that from my mind, I think BBL have impressed me more. I think they've looked better.
So who is the
pound
third
for
best
pound.
team? You've
I
got
think BBL. BBL are the third best team.
So
I disagree
why?
with you. Why? I just think BBL pound for pound have looked a lot better going throughout. You know, they started out the season playing against Navi. Let's not forget, and they beat them. That was right at the very start. Then they went on to face off against Liquid before any roster changes or anything like that. They faced Guild. Just there, the 2-0 game. That's the one argument I can see, right? They lost that game. But that game mattered, Tom. That game really mattered. And it was 14-12, 13-10. Like, for it to be that close in a game that I consider Guild were coming in cyber focused next week, I'm not so sure. I got to say that on paper, I think BBL performed better. If I had to if Mech pulled out and they said, no more Valorant for us, we're out, I put BBL in there right away. And I think that's the way the stats would go as well with the way the matches panned out. But obviously that's just another thing.
Okay, well, so obviously I agree with you in the sense that Guild and Liquid are 1 and 2. I don't think those are arguable. I think even though Navi beat Guild, I agree. I think the fact that they won is a good thing for them, but ultimately I don't know if they would have done if it was game 1 or 2 of the season. What I will say is, looking at map difference for starters, every other team was incredibly negative. It was 4-7, 4-7, 4-8. Navi was 7-8. Every single game they played was close. Every single game they played was winnable. I would say maybe other than the Met game, where it just didn't look like they matched up fantastically. They lost to BBL in overtime, a match that they should have won 2-0, but they lost in OT on Icebox, which was just devastating to watch, because then we went on to the third map, and granted, they got smashed. It wasn't a good game. They should have beaten Team Liquid in a similar fashion, like a close OT, both times in the lead. They kind of choked it out, but I would say in that game, it was 50-50. In the other teams that played Liquid, I don't necessarily think that was the case, other than Guild. So they almost beat Liquid. They did beat Guild. They could and should have probably beaten BBL. They did beat Big, and the only team that they suffered a defeat to was Mech, when the only week where they actually looked like they played well. I think that this team really does deserve to be in playoffs. Their round difference was -1. Do you realize how brutal that is to actually be eliminated? Like, every other team, it's +30, +21, -8, -12, -30
Sender
for Big.
-2. And they made it through.
That's what I mean. Like, that's how ridiculous this is. They never... The only games I think they got banged out was versus Mech, and they also destroyed Mech in one of the games. So this Navi team were close not only to making it through, but close to making it through 4-1. Which is then ridiculous when you actually think that they're now out and in 5th place. Like, I think it's brutal the way that that actually went down. And the other thing you have to bear in mind as well is, literally like a week before the season began, a player of theirs left, and they've had to sort of fix things as they went along. They got Zeddy in to sort of replace JD, and JD was a superstar. So, honestly, I think that, in my eyes, this team was clearly the third best team. I think the only argument was actually Mech, and that's because they actually finished third.
Yeah, I mean, it's also kind of hard though, because if I look on the other side and I think G2, I feel like there's a lot of arguments for them as well. That Fnatic game was close. The Ascend game was very close as well. Like, it ended up 13-11 final map. Sure, it was, 2 blowouts along the way, but
Yeah,
I could definitely see, like, you could look at the way things panned out and say, yeah, well, actually, G2 were one of the better teams in there. They should be up there. Or if they were in the other group, they'd easily be through something like that. But I think the reality is, we got to go by the wins, and right now they didn't get those wins. They didn't get the map. Same for Focus. They
true.
they had some close games, but unfortunately, that doesn't quite cut it. And from a sense perspective, they're not going to look back and go, yeah, it was 13-10 on some of those. That team's as good as us. They're just gonna go, oh, we kind of dropped the ball there. We should close that out sooner. And
Yeah.
I got to see it 2, 3 more times before I start to say, oh, they're actually pretty close to the same level. I think they had some good games, but if you can't close the games out,
Mm.
that's already putting you on a different tier.
Yeah, I would say, just in my eyes, I think they're the roster which I'm going to be most looking at next season. Because
Sure.
they're another one, I think that they did better than London United did last season. But I think that there's still, if they can't close games, then it's worthless. But
Mm.
if they can build on what they've got now, I think they could make top 6. I don't think that's anything crazy. Obviously, we don't know how the season's going to actually run there. They're also one of the only teams that didn't make it to playoffs that I think could do some damage at LCQ. I don't think,
Mhm.
like, if I look at G2, maybe. OG, no. Focus, no. Big, maybe on the good day they could upset someone, but no. And BBL, maybe. But I would say that Navi's the one that's probably most likely. Did BBL even? I can't remember. I've closed the page. I think, did BBL make it in? I think they did. It was Big who
They
did it.
did.
So Big
Yes.
can't even be in that bracket anyway. So yeah, I think that's going to be very interesting, especially with the time that they've been given. Also, likelihood is LCQ will have a new map. So that will completely shake things up as well. I think that'll be the timing. Because otherwise that means it's just going to be added in for champions and I will have a mental breakdown. So I think it would definitely be in. Like, especially with the preview stuff happening now. The LCQ's still not for another couple of months, so or a month and a half, so it'll be plenty of time. So that could completely shake up everything I've just said. But for now, at least, I guess we can go through the different things. Mixwell, one of yours was Mixwell should be dropped, right?
It
We
was
had
indeed.
Mech need a roster change if they're ever going to compete at the level they did before. We also had G2 should just drop the entire roster. I added that one in. I feel like people are probably not going to agree with that one, but hey, what was your second one?
It was Team Liquid are going to crumble going into playoffs.
Team Liquid are going to crumble, yeah. And then the final one is Navi were the third best team. And if you disagree, tell us who you think the third best team was, because I'm genuinely curious to see. There's going to, unless you're Zesh, because then we know that you think it was big and you're wrong. Either way,
very close to making it to the last chance, and
if they won one more game, they would have made it. Unfortunately,
infinitely better
didn't.
than last year.
Oh my god,
Infinitely.
Okay, well, I might have some editing to do after that German accent. But either way, thank you very much.
On. That was an Austrian accent. What are you talking about?
Okay, thank you very much for watching, of course. And if you have anything else that you would like to argue or any crazy statements of your own, make sure to comment them down below. We are going to be back next week with episode number 5.